I've never met a perfect person. I've seen people with swagger and demeanor that might feel they're pretty close. In fact, they might be very close. But more often than not, we have flaws, we have demons, we have friction points that prevent us from moving forward. We have motivators that encourage us to take that step forward. But sometimes those friction points aren't just I'm feeling lazy or like a victim, but it's a disease that takes over your mind.
I didn't stop. I didn't drink like normal people after a while. I thought about alcohol every day.
And in this story, this disease is alcoholism. My guest is Kawchuk.
You don't have the authority to talk about this, and I believe I do. My life and my family was destroyed. I can talk about this.
He's waged a battle against alcoholism for most of his life. 30 years, he's in his 50s. And for the first time, he feels he might have a suit of armor to counter it. But to put on that armor, he had to do a lot of soul searching about who he is and why he matters.
To realize that connections are different when you're fully sober. It's about listening. It's about humility. It's just about breathing, learning how to sit still.
And stay with me to the end when there's a moment of revelation where Jordan might have found an answer for something he's searching for a very long time.
Thank you. That means a lot to me, what you just said. Yeah.
But now somebody has been in and out of treatment centers over 20 times. Someone has caused himself and his family and friends so much pain, joins me today to talk about what life means to him sober, and with it, the lessons we can all learn from it.
I finally hit my zone.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Thank you for listening to Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. If you can, please subscribe to the podcast, and ratings and reviews, well, they're always welcome and they're always appreciated. Jordan Kawchuk, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Hello.
So Jordan, we're going to get into this roller coaster ride of your life, big declines and a lot of movements on the way up. But before we even step into that roller coaster, I want to wind back the clock. And from what I understand, I'm talking to someone who was a gifted student, loved the stage, but also a restless spirit chasing chaos.
What kid isn't anxious and, restless? But Tony, there's a theory that people are born with an alcoholic brain long before they drink. And I think that's related to mental health. But I was taken out of class into special projects classes. I was very creative, but very restless. I had trouble in social situations. Growing up, too, as far as alcohol went, I lived in a house where dad and brothers all listened to cool 50s jazz records, and martinis were in the house, and alcohol was glorified and romanticized. It was Frank Sinatra. It was Dean Martin. But I remember too, in school, in grade 6, I had to write an essay about some fiction situation. I remember watching old SCTV reruns at that time. And my whole essay was about this one soap opera on SCTV and the doctor's office with John Candy. And my whole essay was about the drink cart. The lawyer walked in, poured himself a bourbon. This guy added ice. The whole essay in grade 6 until my teacher had to call my parents. I also remember through therapy that there was a time before I even thought about drink or even try to drink. We're talking like grade 4. I remember saying to my mom on holidays, boy, I could really use a drink. She goes, well, it's hot out. Let's get a Kool-Aid. I said, no, like a drink. I had no idea what that means, but I said it. It was implanted early.
When did you have that first drink?
I started with my friends in grade 11, grade 12, parties in the weekend after band or high school. When I took that first drink, I was home. Something clicked. I didn't know it was my wiring at the time. It took me a long time to know that, but something felt perfect.
One of the interviews that I listened to that you were in, you talked about, I had ADHD, I had anxiety, and that lubricant had an immediate and positive impact. Do you think that was a connection in terms of saying, I don't want to feel this way, so therefore I'm going to mask it with some alcohol?
I think it was the easy fix. I felt good. I didn't feel depressed. I didn't feel anxious. I felt like I fit in. And I think because of my wiring or the way I am, that ease and that comfort turned into addiction. But it was definitely something that made me feel better and didn't make sense because long before people stopped drinking in university or at a party or a wedding, I didn't stop. I didn't drink like normal people after a while. I thought about alcohol every day. I would get worried if there was a wine bottle at a dinner party running out. It turned into a craving and a novelty, into a pathology, into an addiction, into just hell.
You described this in such a unique way. And I love when people frame things that you can immediately step into your shoes. You said, alcoholism isn't a moral failing or a lack of willpower. It's a biopsychosocial spiritual disease, and it hijacks your brain, your body, and your spirit.
Yeah, and you don't understand it. There is a voice inside of you saying, this isn't right. This isn't you. But that voice gets quickly drowned out. And I guess that's addiction. But it is a biopsychosocial spiritual disease. It tears down the architecture of my life. It removes salience in my life. Important things aren't important anymore, even though in my heart and in my soul, I know they are. Destroys relationships, finances. It leaves you with a spiritual hole. It just takes everything from you, but you keep going back because that's how you're wired. And a lot of people, we call them normies, don't understand that. I grew up thinking a drunk or an alcoholic was the hobo riding the rails in a crumpled fedora and a bottle with XXX on it, moonshine. But this disease is everywhere and it doesn't discriminate.
What age were you that you said, I've got a problem and I need help?
It was about in my mid-20s that my wife at the time said, well, this is too much. We're really worried about you. Go get help. And I just started with some classes in Calgary. And then I eventually, in Vancouver, when we moved there, pursued my first treatment center.
And, you talk about your first, and this is one of the things that I really opened my eyes to, how tough this disease is. You've been to 5 addiction treatment centers in 20 years. So when did you go there because your wife or someone you loved encouraged you to do that? And when did you start going there because you said, Jordan, if I don't do something, I won't be around?
Yeah, I wish I had the story, Tony, that I just woke up one day and decided that was it. I'm stopping this. There are people that are one and done like that. I went to my first treatment center. It was a month long. And I remember a guy telling me, this is not going to be your first treatment center. And I thought he was crazy. I thought I was killing it. I was writing the homework well. I was nice. I played cards well. But looking back, I wasn't doing the work. So I've been in sober houses that have no budget. We ate frozen pizza for 2 months. I've been in a treatment center in Surrey that was next to a biker house. It wasn't treatment. It was dysfunctional. And I've been in a 5-star, so to speak, treatment center with fountains and great food and great facilities. I didn't want to be a frequent flyer at treatment centers. Treatment centers aren't always the answer. And when I enter a treatment center like a wide-eyed unbroken horse, I don't want to go. Like you said, Tony, I probably went to the first couple of treatment centers for family, for a wife, for a partner. Some guys go to treatment because they're court ordered or forced by family. I've gone for a different reason, but it took me this long to finally go for myself after detox into a long-term place that really has given me a shift.
So before we get into that, because the other thing I was interested in, I think you wrote an article, you have this sense of humor about it, which and I almost find comics are funny because they're masking their pain very often, not always. But you talked about what it's like to live in a treatment center living with 20 other men. As much as I felt for you, at the same time, I couldn't help but sort of laugh at the way you paint this picture. And I thought maybe you could share with the listeners what a day in the life is like when you've got 20 people at all different stages of recovery, some there because they've been court ordered, and others there because of their partners encouraging them, and others there because they want to take a shot.
I was the only non-smoker, non-vapor, 20 guys that sat around in the smoke pit talking about lifting weights, trucks, and all the women they've conquered. And I show up and I'm a guy in a collared shirt, so they think I'm staff. I have a box full of books and my moleskin notebooks, and I never fit in. And it's funny because I've been told at treatment centers, well, do you think you're too good for us? No, I don't think I'm good enough. I can't relate. I can't show vulnerability here. That said, a day in the life, in a lower end treatment center, which is great too, You're in a bedroom with 6 guys, 3 bunk beds. It's kind of hell, especially if you're already a bad sleeper. It's not a very healing place. 20 guys sharing a shower, fighting over chores, getting the last banana, getting mad. It is a constant back and forth of how to relate, how to practice recovery, and also survive. I've been bullied at some of these treatment centers by the gym bros. Then again, I find humor in a lot of them. I remember going to one treatment center where one of the staff, who was a guy that had 1 year sobriety, and I was a little rough around the edges, wanted to do a meditation class, and he had us all lie down, all of us ragtag people in beards and ripped t-shirts, and he walked around the room. He had us close our eyes, and he said, "Okay, put yourself in a place. You're at an effing beach and there's a bunch of effing chicks in bikinis. Now you're at peace, right? F this, F that." And that was our meditation. And I just thought, if you can't laugh at stuff like that, The other day we were in our circle with a daily topic. What would you want to wake up and have different? We have a guy missing a leg and a guy that's blind in our treatment center. And they all said, "I want to be a Marvel comic guy. I want to fly. I want to be invisible. Don't you want your leg? Don't you want your sight?" These are funny things about treatment when you're living in this microscopic world. And you have to have humor. I could write a book that would devastate my family and readers about all the things that happen to me. Ambulances picking me up in Starbucks bathrooms and blowing jobs and hurting my family. But there's also a humorous side, which helps me recover and also helps people relate.
You really do have an ability with words. And you talked about the distinction between being dry and being sober, emphasizing that it's a lifelong endeavor that changes everything. There's a lot of people out there that are drinking less, curious sober, but that's different, right?
It is. And it's great if people are sober curious. I have a good friend that is 4 months without booze just because he's tired of it and he wants to improve his health and his fitness. But being dry is different than being sober. This is what prompted my whole outing essay when I outed myself in the Globe and Mail, because I was watching yet another dry January go by, and I was in a treatment center, and there were these pithy posts on Facebook about, "Hey, one more day to go. I'm almost at the finish line. This is impossible." And I was like, wait. I don't want you to feel sorry for me, but I have the other 334 days to go. I'll tell you what that's like. So being dry is just changing your drink, and I think being sober is changing everything. Being dry is white knuckling and counting days. Being sober is a whole new set of values and behaviors, a connection with something spiritual, a reconnection with self. It is everything that's different and good. I know people in some 12-step programs that are 5, 10, 15 years sober, but they're dry. They're miserable. They're still hanging out with terrible people, complaining, cynical. That's not being sober. That's just being dry. And I've been both.
It's interesting. It seems like alcohol was your social lubricant to connecting with people. I'm going to drink before I go to the party so that I can, be at the party. Today, you've completely reversed your thinking. And you say that the opposite of addiction is connections, actively rebuilding and fostering connections, not only with yourself, but your family and friends. Unpack that a little bit for me.
The Globe and Mail article, when I outed myself as an alcoholic, was supposed to be just a look at, I was questioning, did I find alcohol or did alcohol find me? If I looked at my past without even trying, my favorite artist was Tom Waits. I read Charles Bukowski. My favorite movie was Barfly. My first job on a university bulletin board was being a Bacardi Breezer rep. My next job was in a wine shop. I formed a band with my brother that was based around martinis, and we traveled the world singing about drinking. I made a movie with friends called American Beer. This is a big coincidence or not a coincidence at all, but booze has followed me. So I was always the go-to guy to have fun and drink with and go to concerts. My default then became drunk. So my connections were very superficial. Like my dad, I loved being a regular at a bar. So I would go to the Legion and hang out for hours. And I loved having my own stool there. But those connections were superficial. It took me a long time, too long, to realize that connections are different when you're fully sober. It's about listening. It's about humility. It's just about breathing, learning how to sit still, learning how to sit down with somebody and have a conversation. I'd really, being in the media for years, interviewing rock stars and much music, I thought I was a good conversationalist. I can't do it. I'm learning how to do that. I'm learning how to do so much. I'm learning how to eat again, learning how to have sex. I'm learning how to read, write. It's a lot.
When you talk about I'm learning how to do all this stuff, it's almost like you've the Hollywood thing where the person was lost in the jungle for 10 years and comes out and has to rethink their life. Is it happen gradually, or is this one day you wake up, you've been sober for a while and you look around and going, I'm a different person and I'm now on a completely different journey? Or is it just slowly happen and manifest that way that you can come to the conclusion now?
Like a good summer camp, treatment can be like you have this jolt, this spirit and spark. You have all these wonderful new friends and you feel alive. But after 30 days, you just have a binder full of homework and you go back to the same home, the same problems, the same situations. The trick is maintaining that spark and carrying it on through life. So you are like a castaway coming back to life. And there's a reason that treatment centers and 12-step programs have a very, very low percentage of success, is because nothing really changes. You are inspired for 30, 40 days in a treatment center and you just walk out with a binder and a pamphlet for where AA meetings are. And it's funny because parents will pay and remortgage their house $50,000 thinking their child will get cured, and it's just a business. It took some of us 3 decades to be a drunk or have alcohol use disorder, which is the gentler modern term for it. It took me years to develop this. I'm not going to catch it in 40 days or from reading a book harder or for praying harder. Tony, I want to tell you just how complex and confusing alcohol use disorder is. I've had AA sponsors telling me I'm not doing the steps or reading the book hard enough. I've had doctors telling me relapse is okay and you need more medications. I've had family members say, instead of a drink, pick up a nice latte. I've had counselors saying you haven't found your trauma. It goes on and on. And so it's no wonder people don't want to open up or face this, because you get so much confusing information. And it took me this long, 3 decades, I'm in my 50s now, to find the perfect cocktail of medicine, counseling, self-work. And pardon the cocktail pun, but actually don't, because that shows you how this is in me. I use the word cocktail.
Did you ever walk out of a treatment center and having a drink immediately?
My first one.
And did you think that was just one drink and I can control it now? Or was it just, I can't wait to have a drink?
Tony, I'm an educated professional guy, and I have walked out of a hospital with a tube in my arm just to run to the liquor store. That's how strong it was. My hippocampus or my lizard brain says, you need one. The first 30-day treatment center I went to, my mom came out to visit and was with my wife. And I came home and it was a big celebration because then it was seen as like, well, you're cured. And I remember that night, I missed my bar friends so much. There was something that pulled me, something insane that pulled me. I went back to the Legion to see all the old guys, to feel at home, something of connection. And I picked up a drink. If I take one sip, it'll lead me down the addiction path until I take down everything. I cannot stop once I have the drink. It's not being a lush. I cannot stop. That's my disease.
Stick around, because when we return, Jordan and I discuss the healing power of the written word and this extraordinary journey he's on to find forgiveness, to find time to contemplate, and most importantly, to find time with his daughters.
Hi, this is Tony Chapman, host of the radio show and podcast Chatter That Matters. Did you know that only 1 in 5 youth with a mental health illness can get access to the care they need? Well, a big shout out to the RBC Foundation and RBC Future Launch for supporting over 150 youth mental health organizations. And in doing so, they help youth and their families get the care they need and deserve.
Being sober is a whole new set of values and behaviors, a connection with something spiritual, a reconnection with self. It is everything that's different and good.
You're listening to Jordan Kawchuk. Doesn't have to do this interview. Many would be embarrassed by it. I mean, here's a human being that has spent 30 years battling alcoholism. He's in his 20th treatment center. Today, he's 9 months sober. And he shares the story so we can walk in the shoes with people that battle this disease. And also, hopefully, have empathy for how hard it is for many to conquer it. One of the patterns that's emerged on this show is the importance of journaling and writing as part of the healing process. And we're going to talk a little bit about your upcoming book, but it sounds like that was a big part of your 30-year path to being sober, was your ability to just start writing these things down, really coming to terms of who you are and how serious this disease was.
And I have to admit, Tony, I'm a terrible journaler. But, you know, after writing for years in television and radio, I gave myself permission to call myself a writer in the last few years. And it was only when I wrote with complete vulnerability that something clicked and people started to read and I started to feel better. When I write now about recovery or my path or my journey, and I'm really in the zone, I feel like more me and I feel free of me, which I think is a good explanation for sobriety too. I'm not trying to rebrand myself or tell others what to do or make people feel sorry for me. I just write what is real, which I think is the goal of writing, and somehow it's resonating.
Your upcoming book, Why I Wasn't There, is, I would say, partly therapy, but partly an apology to your daughters?
It's not directly addressed to them, but people that have alcoholic parents, children of addiction, will recognize themselves in it. My journey with my daughters has been tough, and they couldn't understand, and I couldn't understand why I just couldn't be there, whether it was treatment or I was sick. I guess, you know, we talk about rock bottoms and every bottom has a basement, but it was a couple of years ago when I was doing really well that I flew out to Kelowna to see my daughter's grade 10 play. And the night before, something in my brain in the hotel told me to have a beer. And Tony, I didn't make it out of that hotel room for 2 weeks until my brother had to rescue me. My daughters didn't talk to me for over a year to protect themselves, not to punish me. Since then, I've had an amazing reunion with them that is beyond words and a gift of sobriety. This book isn't about an apology to them or me blaming my disease, me blaming my genetics, me blaming situations. It's my story. It's my story about present day living with a bunch of jailbirds and starting to tutor kids. And it's a story of my past, the good and bad things that happened to me in alcohol. I mean, I've done some wonderful things. I've played parties for Tom Hanks. I've played on top of the World Trade Center. I've had a lot of great things, and there's a lot of terrible, terrible things. And they're all going to be in this book to somehow say, that's why I wasn't there. It's not okay that I wasn't there, but here's what happened.
Talk to me about what you're doing now, because you just sort of referenced living with 20 jailbirds. So I'm curious, what's Jordan up to here with his jailbirds?
I love the word jailbirds, and they know that. I call them they call themselves jailbirds, and they're wonderful, wonderful men. Right now, I'm living in a therapeutic community. Been there for 9 months, and it's unlike any treatment or program I've done. So we all live in a community. There's no top-down counselor and boss. We all just live together and learn how to communicate and live and recover together. And it's a wonderful brotherhood. There's an irony that I'm living with 20 jailbirds. You know, there's once in a while a guy will come in that hasn't been to jail, but there have been months where I'm the only guy who doesn't smoke and doesn't have prison experience, which is great because they teach me the wrong things and the right things. But the irony is I was allowed a little bit of a part-time job in this treatment center, and I wanted to do something with writing, and I applied to a learning center, and I'm tutoring little kids, kindergarten up to grade 11, reading and writing. And it's just a little over minimum wage and only 10, 11 hours a week. And it's the most meaningful job I've had in decades. And I somehow, not to get all woo-woo on you, Tony, but I sometimes sit with kids two sisters that are the exact age gap of my daughters. These kids are in grade 2 and grade 6. I have this ache and this homesickness, but then this gratitude that I'm getting sort of a universe redo to read and write with these kids that I didn't get a chance to do with my daughters.
And how are you financially surviving? I mean, I have to believe you didn't save a lot of money during this roller coaster ride.
No, the roller coaster rides, alcohol use disorder destroys finances. And I think there's a misconception that you just drink your money away. That's not it. There you end up having to pay for hotels and visas, and you just need money to live. So I unfortunately have had to really dip into my savings and RSP. And now I'm living like I'm 16. I'm rebuilding my life at a late age. Am I worried about retiring and financial? Absolutely. But I get a little help at this place that I'm living. It is funded, so I get to save money there. I have all the confidence that with doing the next right thing and being sober and my gift of writing, something will come about. In the past, I've had the mistake of, a couple months sobriety and then landing a job. I can tell people about my work experience and get these jobs, but I can't maintain it if I'm not clear. Yeah, financially, it's tough.
And how strong do you feel? Like, are you at that point where the next time you're in a hotel room and you're that whispered you're saying, just have a beer, that you now have the resilience to counter that?
My daughter is graduating grade 12. This is the daughter who I blew it with a couple of years ago, and we had a great reunion when I went to see her play in grade 12, where she was the lead singing 20 songs, and we reunited in the lobby. And she was crying, tears of joy, tears of confusion, and she ran into my arms. We cried into each other's arms for a good minute, and that was the best moment of my life. So my goal in this treatment center is to go see her graduate. And I don't want to go to a hotel by myself. I know I can do it, but just to build trust and to be safe, I'm taking my good friend Steve, and we're going on a dude's road trip, and I'm going to celebrate graduation with my two daughters.
That's a beautiful story. The other thing that it's shifting gears a little bit, but your insight that the increasing openness and involvement from celebrities and musicians is actually working in the favor of people realizing it is a disease, and I'm not the only one out there.
Yeah, like you say, you walk into any bookstore, there's a whole chapter on sober, curious books. Celebrities just are open about it, whether it's Bradley Cooper and Brad Pitt or, Jamie Lee Curtis. Musicians sing about getting sober and recovery. Even the younger generation, there's sober parties, sober dances, and they don't look at booze the way I did or my father or grandfather did. I think the impression now with young people is that booze isn't cool. It's kind of weird. It's kind of how I felt when my parents would tell me they would smoke in airplanes. I'm like, what? And that's a good thing. And all this leads to a culture where we can talk about it openly, where someone like me can tell my story and hopefully it reaches somebody that's maybe not in a 12-step program.
Another thing that you talked about openly on more than one occasion when I was doing my research is the importance of storytelling, personal stories. And is that so that if people put themselves in the shoes of somebody that has an alcoholic, it's to make them be more empathetic, or is it more to reach out to people that are struggling with this disease to say there's a different path to walk?
Well, I never set out to have a message, Tony. This writing just felt good and people started to publish it and I started to get calls and residency opportunities. I am not a sobriety coach. I'm still in treatment. I'm not a representative of AA. I'm just a guy that writes my story. But I think why my story resonates is because it is so vulnerable and people see themselves in it that maybe aren't in a 12-step program. Like, wow, this guy can talk about it. And since writing about it, I've had so many people from my past and tons of strangers just reach out to me saying, you just described what I've done and I've never read that before. And I've had a lot of parents say, I think I understand my daughter a bit more. I'm having a bit more patience with her. I've had people come to the Vancouver Island where I live and look me up for a coffee. Storytelling helps. It gives people an opening. It gives people permission to see this. Well, it's not my fault. Personally, I'm accountable and it's my responsibility if I take that first drink and I'm accountable for all the things I did that I need to amend. but I'm not responsible for how I'm wired or the disease kicking in. And that's freeing.
Jordan, there's people that have called you out because they feel you don't have the currency to talk about it, whether that's how many years you've been sober or that you're not following the right program. What do you say to them?
Well, I've been at this for 30 years. I've had sober time. I've had not sober time. I'm coming from the trenches. Sometimes I think maybe this is more effective than the guy with 30-year sobriety or the biker in the school gymnasium scaring people straight. Those are old stories. I can tell you exactly what happened to me this morning in treatment. And I think that might be refreshing to people. I had a couple of people from AA reach me and they say, well, you haven't reached humility if you're on TV talking about this, or you don't have the authority to talk about this. And I believe I do. My life and my family was destroyed by this. I can talk about this. And I don't appreciate in some of these programs that when you do have a relapse, which alcohol doctors say is part of the disease, some of these programs make you start back to zero, put your hand up in meetings and admit that you are making a big mistake and you didn't do it. And it feels like your time up till then has erased. This is the first time this year that I'm looking at all my time as valuable, good and bad. I don't start over when I get sick. I'm not a bad person. I just get sick.
Everybody seems to look under the rock for trauma. And if you don't have it, you seem to, they almost question whether you're capable of healing. Share the story where you realize that trauma isn't always the reason why.
There's a misconception in treatment centers that everyone that goes in, even Gabor Mate says, everybody has trauma with addiction. And I'm telling you, Tony, I grew up in the best family. I was privileged, was great at school. I was great in social circles. I had a great career, beautiful wife, and kids. I haven't found my trauma, and I believe I don't have it. So when I was in treatment, after 2 weeks, there would be people in group therapy where their light bulb would go on about their mother or their father or some abuse. And then, bam, I found my trauma. And I would get down on myself after years of trying this. What is my trauma? I've had some strange things in the past, but I didn't have this secret. And it was a counselor at this place called Edgewood, this nice treatment center on the island, that took me aside when he saw that I was struggling with this. He goes, I'm going to tell you something that's going to free you. And I said, what? He goes, you don't have trauma. You don't have anything. You're just wired this way and you have a disease. And that freed me, Tony, that I wasn't failing at having trauma. I wasn't failing at sharing, failing at journaling, failing at praying. I just had this thing that's really powerful. And that's okay.
I'm going to tell you something, and I'm not a psychologist, don't pretend to be. I think your trauma your whole life has been imposter syndrome. And I think alcohol was your original way to mask social situations. But I think even today, you're on this show because you write some beautiful words that impact people. You have every right to do that, whether you were 1 day sober, 9 months sober, or heaven forbid, if you ever fell off again and wrote about it. I think what you're doing is you're allowing other people to understand whether they're actually are walking in the shoes of being an alcoholic or sadly the friends and family that also pay a price. I'm looking forward to the next decade with you and just seeing much in the way you're helping these young kids with reading and writing and feeling the benefit of that. I think you've got many more people ahead of you that you're going to help. So
thank you. That means a lot to me, what you just said. I do think I have imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Jordan, what advice could you offer people listening, whether they're struggling with self-esteem, drinking too much, drugs? What advice can you give to people from all those 20 treatment centers that you'd say, here's a couple things or one thing that you should do immediately just to buy time or put things in perspective?
Well, one thing is connection, reaching out. I had trouble with that for a long time. I can write about it, but to pick up a phone and tell a guy that I know, say, I'm really hurting here. That's really important. But I also think it's important to realize that if you are struggling with this and see signs of it, you have to think of it medically as well. If you get a rash and you think it might lead to shingles, see a doctor. And the doctor with this can lead you to counseling, treatment, medication, right? So don't feel ashamed if you feel that you have a sense of alcohol use disorder. Going to a church basement and feeling ashamed and drinking bad coffee without knowing anybody maybe isn't the first step. Maybe you could see a doctor, maybe talk to a friend. There are so many avenues. And Tony, I wish I did this 30 years ago, but I accept that this is my journey.
Jordan, I always end my podcast with my 3 takeaways. And this is maybe not a takeaway from something you said, but here's what I have to say to you. You might have found your calling. You keep backtracking. I'm not a counselor. I'm not here to give advice. I'm still undergoing treatment. But I think the words that you write and the courage you show coming out and being honest and authentic are as important to people suffering as also knowing that there's like-minded people like me, and it happens to be a celebrity like Bradley Cooper. And I think you're holding back a little bit. And maybe you've held back your entire life, your potential. But I think that when you get that book out and you continue to speak about it, you're going to realize that all the pain that you've caused others and the pain you've caused yourself, out of it, there is a silver lining. The second thing is this more me and I'm free of me, which is such a powerful thought that you're actually finding who you are after all these years by freeing everything you used to be. And I think that part of us, when we go on these journeys of recovery or trying to improve, we have to shed things along the way. And I think this light has gone on that said, I'm going to get rid of this because I want more of that. And the last thing was, did I find alcohol or did alcohol find me? And how you've been this magnetic connection to everything to do with, from your family that used to have martini nights with jazz, to being in a martini band with your brother, to as a young guy having a favorite chair in the Legion, which to me, everybody else in that chair must have been 50 years older than you. To me, it's a very honest, my dad was an alcoholic, and I can tell you that you've given me a much better perspective on how hard it is to push back in something that invades the brain at the level it invaded yours. So for all of that and more, I'm delighted that we had a chance to bring you on to Chatter That Matters, and I can't wait that you come back on when your book's out.
Thanks so much, Tony. That means a lot to me.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.